Today, the stately Italianate buildings near the River Frome at Fish Ponds in Bristol are home to the Health and Applied Sciences programme at the University of the West of England. During its 162-year history, the pennant stone walls of this picturesque campus have seen their fair share of change. During the First World War, the building was requisitioned by the War Office, becoming the Beaufort War Hospital. Beaufort saw nearly 30,000 wounded and ill soldiers pass through its doors. In 1996, the university moved in. But for most of its existence, the buildings were home to a psychiatric hospital. First opened in 1861 as the Bristol Pauper Lunatic Asylum, the hospital was eventually renamed the Bristol Mental Hospital and finally Glenside. While the records of the hospital and all its iterations are now housed in the Bristol archives, the stone walls of the campus still hold many secrets. Among them may be the truth of what happened in 1957 to two young children, Royston and June Sheasby, Bristol's Babes in the Woods. On Thursday, June the 20th, 1957, Barbara Sheasby waved her two youngest children off as they went to look at the horses in a nearby field. Southern England was experiencing a heat wave, and Barbara was undoubtedly thankful for a moment of peace while she decorated the family's home in Brockworth Crescent, Bristol. The children left home at about 5:30 p.m, walking hand in hand down the road. Distracted by her painting, Barbara was shocked to discover the next time she looked at the clock that it was already 7 p.m. and June, aged 7, and Royston, aged 5, were still gone. She and her other son walked to Wickham Glen, where the children had said they were going, but there was no sign of them. Police were soon called and a search of the area began. The following day, the Sheasbys sent their oldest son, 11-year-old John, to school and then joined in the search themselves alongside a group of Boy Scouts, police and public volunteers. The search focused on the Stapleton area of Bristol, which included the Snuff Mills Public Park, an area of wooded slopes cleaved by the River Frome. As news of the missing children spread, volunteer search forces grew to over 1,000 civilians. Large groups were formed to search the three main woods in the area: Longwood, Barnwood, and Hermitage Wood. The searchers walked in straight lines spaced a few yards apart, travelling from one side of the woods to the other, while the Boy Scouts were given the job of searching the old slag heap. The most likely theory at the time was that the children had fallen into the water. On the first day of searching, a police tracker dog led his handler to the bank of Duchess Pond after picking up a scent. Firemen immediately began working to lower the local fishing spot's water level, pumping millions of gallons of water over a bridge and into a hollow that entered the Frome, so that frogmen from the Bristol Sub-Aqua Club could access all parts of the pond. The Snuff Mill Weir, a low dam near the Stapleton Flour Mill, was also heavily searched, though with great difficulty. Superintendent Aubrey Burt told the Evening Post, quote, "Some of the woods were almost impossible because of the thick undergrowth, and there were many streams, ponds and copses," unquote. Local officials also urged Stapleton residents to search their gardens, greenhouses and outbuildings for any sign of the missing children. As tough as the search was, the police were not without witnesses. After initially leaving for Wickham Glen, June and Royston had been spotted by a neighbour 5 minutes later. June was carrying a chocolate box and the children were alone. A 10-year-old boy said he saw the pair around 6:30 p.m. and that they appeared to be watching the river. And a local man recalled seeing two children that matched June and Royston's description fishing with a jam jar from a log in the river. The man had told them to return to the bank, which they did. He then left after they were safely on land, and a child who knew the pair reported seeing them near Bamboo Island at 7:30 p.m. On June the 25th, the situation seemingly changed when an unstamped and undated letter was delivered to a Bristol newspaper. The note read, quote, "The children are alive and well at this moment. It is useless for the police to continue searching. We hope they enjoyed their bath in the river. My brother and I took the children away on Thursday night, and they will be returned unhurt on payment of £200. This must be left at the GPO addressed to H. Rice, to be called for on Wednesday afternoon. My brother will collect it, but if he should be detained, I shall kill the children after 2 hours from the time he leaves here. If he is allowed to leave, the children will be returned unhurt. Signed, West Indies." Unquote. For Barbara and Jessie Sheasby, the ransom letter instilled new fears, but also fresh hope. For days, it had seemed that they would watch their children's bodies be pulled from the river. Now, it was possible that June and Royston were still alive, with only £200 standing between them and being reunited with their son and daughter. Dummy parcels of notes were left at the Bristol General Post Office as teams of detectives watched the area carefully for the next 3 days. But no one ever arrived to claim the money. The police were forced to concede that the ransom note was simply a wicked hoax. Though they were unable to rule out the possibility of kidnapping, it didn't seem likely any longer. The effort to find June and Royston continued, with large groups of women volunteering their help as male searchers were forced to return to work. By June 29th, the police were confident that the children were nowhere on land in the area near their home, and all rivers and ponds in the area had been searched. The following day, police told local news, quote, "The river has been abortive so far, but we cannot, of course, rule it out. Tree roots, weeds and potholes are so plentiful there that we could go on dragging forever and not turn out anything except old cans and bicycles. But we shall carry on, and unless something new comes along, I shall not ask for any more help from the public, although they have done a grand job." Unquote. Indeed, they had. At its peak, the search for June and Royston included as many as 10,000 volunteers. Late in the evening of July the 1st, police officer Derek Bruff was searching a slope near Snuff Mills when he noticed a small hand protruding from the leaves that littered the forest floor. Beneath that lay the body of 5-year-old Royston Sheasby. Bruff quickly called for help, scouring the nearby area for any sign of June. Floodlights were erected, the area was cordoned off, and police began collecting evidence. Just after midnight, Royston's body was removed in a coffin by 4 police officers. Upon lifting him, investigators discovered that his sister, 7-year-old June, was lying underneath. Though police had previously searched the area, unseasonal heavy rains had exposed the shallow grave. Still wearing the clothes they'd had on when last seen by their mother, June and Royston had both been severely beaten. Each had sustained skull fractures, and police believed they had been bludgeoned with a blunt instrument. With the chilling discovery of the 2 small bodies, the investigation quickly shifted from missing persons to a double murder. The news of the discovery shook the Bristol community to its core. Murders were rare, and the murders of small children rarer still. Parents who had lived through the Blitz just 16 years earlier thought their anxieties were over, that they could raise their children without the fear that marred their childhoods. now a 5- and 7-year-old, had been brutally murdered with no apparent motive whatsoever. The thought of a killer capable of such a heinous crime prowling the woods where their children played was a fear they couldn't have imagined. The dense copse where Royston and June were found was about 100 yards from the river in Grove Wood. The grave was merely a few steps from the ground at the Bristol Mental Hospital. As police continued searching the woods for clues and the post-mortems were underway, lines of inquiry began in earnest. Police were hoping to determine if any patients who had a history of violence toward children had been out on the hospital grounds the evening June and Royston disappeared. But their questioning was not limited just to Bristol Hospital. 3 other mental health facilities in the area, Stoke Park, Brentry and Purdown, were also heavily focused on in the early days of the investigation. Just hours after the bodies of June and Royston Sheasby had been discovered, a patient escaped from Purdown Mental Hospital by climbing down a drain pipe. The police reported that he had been transferred to Purdown from the Rampton State Mental Institution, a criminal facility. Shockingly, it was not the only escape to happen that week. A man from the Bristol Hospital was missing, but later found and cleared by police. Another who was missing from Brentry was also traced and eliminated. The only solid lead police seemed to have in the case were reports of a man wearing a blue suit who spoke to an off-duty fireman near a place the children were seen playing the day they disappeared. Another witness saw the man sitting on a log on the bank of the river, not far from the glade where the bodies were discovered. He was described as being 5 feet 10 inches tall and between the ages of 40 and 45. Another report of a man seen peering through bushes at children near Grove Wood could have indicated the same suspect. He was described as having dark hair and wearing steel or horn-rimmed glasses. Police desperately searched for the man in blue, but to no avail. While they knew they were courting couples who had been in the area at the time and may have seen something, it's believed fear of judgment due to social norms around dating kept these couples from coming forward. In early July, police received an anonymous letter written on pale blue notepaper. The note, which police did not release to the public, was said to be just 20 words long and contain confirmation of something the police already suspected. Believing the letter writer to have information that could further help the investigation, they issued a public statement asking for the person who penned it to come forward. June and Royston were buried in Filton on July the 9th. Detectives attended, hoping to blend into the crowd and catch sight of anyone suspicious. The details of the funeral had been kept private, but a crowd of nearly 100 still attended outside the Sheasby home. 20 wreaths were laid in their front garden, and a brief service was held at the family's church before the burial at Harry Stokes Cemetery. The same day, police began a new door-to-door inquiry, visiting some 2,000 homes in the Stapleton area. The day after the funeral, it was reported that the anonymous letter writer had come forward voluntarily to speak with police. Investigators agreed to keep the person's identity a secret, but did reveal that it was a woman. Police only confirmed that their interview with the woman tied up a line of inquiry. The same day, it was reported that a patient from Brentry was questioned after absconding from the hospital. It was believed that the patient had in his possession a letter addressed to Barbara and Jessie Sheasby, along with a newspaper clipping showing a photograph of June and Royston. But again, investigators did not elaborate on the interview, only saying, "He told us a remarkable story, but there are not going to be any further developments arising out of our interview with him." The Begbrook Primary School Parent-Teacher Organisation organised a fundraiser to send the Sheasby family to Blackpool for a vacation at the end of July. The day their train departed Bristol, 2 police officers questioned a person in the Midlands about their possible involvement in the case. The man, who was being held on a breaking and entering charge, had made a statement that police thought could refer to the murders. But he had a rock-solid alibi for the night of June the 20th, and the lead went no further. Meanwhile, inquiries continued among the 1,200 patients at Bristol Mental Hospital, the 700 at Purdown, and the 5,000 at Stoke Park. Barbara Sheasby advised police to question female patients, as she had often warned June against interacting with strange men. Questioning the mental patients proved far more difficult than the police could possibly have known. Dozens of false confessions, accusations, and distractions kept the police from making any real headway in finding the killer. One patient of particular interest was known as the storyteller, an elderly gentleman who was known to tell stories to children at Snuff Mills Park. Having parole privileges from Bristol Mental Hospital, he could be seen on occasion telling stories to groups of children about Davy Crockett and William Tell. But on July 17th, police told reporters, quote, "He has been most cooperative, but we find he is quite unable to help us any further in our inquiries. No doubt he will be down in the park again sometime, singing his songs and telling his stories, and there is no reason that we can see why he should be regarded with suspicion." Unquote. While still focusing heavily on interviewing patients at the local mental hospitals, Bristol police also asked for help in other jurisdictions in widening their search. But expanding the net failed to yield anything significant. For weeks, there was no news to report on the case. Then, on August the 20th, a 26-year-old male nurse was questioned for 32 hours after he was overheard telling someone he would be forced out of Bristol over allegations that he was a child murderer. Police questioned the man's landlady, searched his lodgings, examined staff records at his place of employment, and even collected samples of clothing for analysis. And yet, all the leads fizzled out quickly. The same man was questioned again years later, still to no avail. Soon, weekly updates in the local newspapers turned to monthly, and then only a few a year. The brutal murder of 2 young children that had once drawn thousands to search had faded from the collective consciousness. Then, in 1964, Dr. Arthur Hyde Williams, a Home Office psychiatrist, told a London conference that a prisoner serving a sentence for a minor offence had confessed to killing 2 children shortly before his death. According to the doctor, the patient had died of a guilty conscience, having carried the weight of murdering a small boy and girl. After learning of the psychiatrist's claim, Bristol police attempted to obtain permission to view a document containing the confession. But their request was denied, and their most promising line of inquiry in years was finished before it began. Dr. Hyde Williams likewise refused to give further information. The confession was a cruel dead end for Barbara and Jessie Sheasby. Why had Dr. Hyde revealed the information only to refuse to add any meaningful context? There were no other murders of small children in recent years, so who else could the prisoner have been referring to? Was the man once a patient at a Bristol area mental hospital? Did he wear horn-rimmed glasses? Was he seen near the River Frome on June 20th, 1957? The answer to these questions were mercilessly kept from the grieving family and the investigators trying so hard to bring them closure. There have been no further leads in the murders of June and Royston Sheasby, despite police questioning over 25,000 people in connection with the crime. There has been no new leads in the murders of June and Royston Sheasby, despite the police talking to over 25,000 people in connection with the crime. It's hard not to wonder if the investigation's intense focus on the area's mental hospitals meant that a killer free from the stigma attached to mental illness was allowed to slip past unnoticed. Now, over 66 years have passed since June and Royston Sheasby were murdered on the banks of the River Frome. Eyewitnesses who may have seen something useful are now scattered to the winds. Detectives who worked the case are long since retired or buried. Barbara and Jessie Sheasby died without closure or justice. John Sheasby, who should have had a brother and sister by his side, spent the rest of his life as an only child. Today, Snuff Mills Park remains a popular Bristol beauty spot, though some visitors have claimed to feel a profound sense of unease whilst walking through the woods near the river. The mental hospitals that serve the area have been closed, consolidated or renovated. The stone walls of the old Bristol Mental Hospital, the slow-moving waters of the River Frome and the wooded copses between them continue to hold their secrets, while justice remains elusive. I think we can all agree a rather harrowing story, that. I do hope in the future we get to find out who made that confession. Do let me know your thoughts in the box below. Thanks for watching. And indeed, thank you to the viewer who suggested that we cover this case. You are all indeed very welcome to leave your comments and suggestions for what stories we cover next. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.